In this presentation, I explore an essentialist conspiracy theory that imagines a globally destructive gender identity ideology and which fuses with the Jewish question. In the idea of what is to be done about the harm that trans activism, funded by a few rich and powerful Jews, is inflicting on humanity. This fusion is both possible and probable since racism is always a gendered and sexualised phenomenon. The idea of race is essentially an essentialist narrative of sexualised difference. I begin with some observations of the recent public distancing made by some gender-critical feminists from their long-standing political right and far-right allies or followers. In December 2023, Unheard hosted a debate between Helen Joyce, the author of Trans When Ideology Meets Reality, and the radical feminist writer Julie Bindel, titled Should TERFs Unite with the Right? The host notes a recent schism within the gender-critical circle as Kelly J. Keane invited Hearts of Oak, a far-right group led by Tommy Robinson, to a rally in Brighton. Early in the debate, Joyce states, "I am not of the left and I never have been. The left is on the nature-denying and utopian side of politics. When something's a principle that's worth universalising, many very different sorts of people are going to want that principle to happen too. I was supposed to put out a statement saying that I denounced Hearts of Oak. I refused. I had it explained to me that I should put out that statement because it would be useful for left-wing feminists to point to." While occupying opposing sides in the debate, Joyce and Bindel align in their opposition to trans ideology, gender madness and gender fuckery. At both the beginning and the end, the audience overwhelmingly vote in favour of uniting with the right. In August 2024, a statement on the gender-critical movement and the far right was launched and signed by prominent gender-critical feminists. This statement was made in the aftermath of the tragic Southport murders in late July. "We, the undersigned," it states, "are deeply disturbed by the populist messages, particularly targeting Muslims, that have gained traction among significant numbers of social media accounts associated with the gender-critical movement." The statement goes on to remark, "We understand that the failure of the political parties of the centre and left to defend women's rights and oppose the unnecessary medicalisation of gender-confused young people has allowed this issue to become the preserve of the right. Many have long argued that this abnegation of duty has been short-sighted and dangerous because it presented the populist right with an open goal they have fully exploited." In November 2024, Women's Place UK disbanded. In their closing statement, they state, "Women's Place UK has always been unapologetically part of a left that can envisage a radical transformation of society necessary to end sexism and men's violence against women. The abandonment of a materialist understanding of women's oppression and the growth of neoliberal identity politics in other parts of the left have been massive betrayals of women. Conversely, we have long warned that the embrace of gender conservatism and tolerance of, even support for, the far right in parts of the gender-critical movement is an enormous danger to women." The England-based gender-critical feminist milieu has long housed right and far-right allies or followers. So why are the public ruptures appearing at this point? In part because the gender-critical feminist movement has won. Moreover, the ascendancy of the anti-trans populist and far-right has consistently been framed as the fault of the pro-trans political left for abandoning women and children. Gender-critical feminism pitches a battle between ideology versus reality, or idealism versus materialism. Within this framework, gender identity ideology is a mad and maddening evacuation of the senses, in contrast to plain common sense. Moreover, this ideology is imagined to be driven by a hidden destructive agenda. This battle between ideology versus reality or idealism versus materialism mobilises the sex-gender dichotomy. The original intention and use of the sex-gender dichotomy in currents of socialist and radical feminist thought during the 1980s and 1990s was to critique the idea of biology is destiny. Where it has ended up is in slipping into, accommodating willfully or not, consciously or not, a biological essentialism and a crude and static materialism of sex is real, gender is fiction, and a related conspiracy theory of the threatening trans activist other. Judith Butler reminds us, can we refer to a given sex or a given gender without first inquiring into how sex and or gender is given, through what means? Are not the ostensibly natural facts of sex discursively produced by various scientific discourses in the service of other political and social interests? Sex is not a simple fact or static condition of the body, but a process whereby regulatory norms materialise sex and achieve this materialisation through a forcible reiteration of those norms. In other words, the sex-gender dichotomy was always problematic because sex is gendered. Butler here is closer to a Marxist materialism than leftist gender-critical feminists. In the German ideology, Marx develops on his statement from the theses of Feuerbach that the human essence is no abstraction inherent in each single individual. In its reality, it is the ensemble of the social relations. The essence of the fish is its being, water, to go no further than this one proposition. The essence of the freshwater fish is the water of a river, but the latter ceases to be the essence of the fish and is no longer a suitable medium of existence as soon as the river is made to serve industry, or as soon as its water is diverted into canals. Furthermore, even the objects of the simplest sensuous certainty are only given to us through social development. Even pure natural science is provided with an aim, as with its material, only through trade and industry, through the sensuous activity of human beings. Neither Marx nor Butler are biology or nature denialists. They stand in a tradition of critical inquiry in which, as Latour reflects, we move closer to facts, not away from them, in a renewed empiricism. In contrast to conspiratorial thinking, we assemble, we don't debunk. Gender-critical feminism, however, seeks to demystify the mystery of trans existence and the struggle for trans rights. Rather than assembling, they debunk. I turn now to the conspiracy theory of gender identity ideology, fused with the Jewish question. The independent journalist and blogger Jennifer Billick promotes an idea that especially rich and powerful Jews are behind a capitalist transhumanism project to profit from the destruction of the natural essence of human beings by science and technology. While Billick could be considered a marginal figure in the gender-critical feminist milieu, her thesis is echoed in Helen Joyce's book Trans, a Bible for both conservative and leftist gender-critical feminism. Billick claims that the trans agenda, which preys and experiments on the most vulnerable, children, is part of this wider transhumanism project funded by the billionaire Jews Jennifer Pritzker, Penny Pritzker, J.B. Pritzker, George Soros and Martin Rothblatt, and mega-rich gay men like Tim Gill and John Stryker. The Pritzker cousins and others may be well on their way to engineering a new way to be human. But what could possibly explain the abrupt drive of wealthy elites to deconstruct who and what we are and to manipulate children's sex characteristics in clinics now spanning the globe, while claiming new rights for those being deconstructed? Perhaps it is profit. Perhaps it is the pleasure of seeing one's own personal pleasures writ large. Billick presents the transgender industry as a massive medical industrial complex connected to big pharma and big fertility. Trans is commerce. And she distills the trans agenda down to excessively rich and powerful men with autogynephilia, like, I quote, the dude Jennifer Pritzker, who desire to claim female biology as their own. Returning to Helen Joyce. Trans, When Ideology Meets Reality is not a book about trans people. This is rather a book about trans activism. It is a story of policy and institutional capture, of charitable foundations controlled by billionaires, joining forces with activist groups to pump money into the lobbying behind the scenes for legal change. They have won over big political parties and big businesses, including tech giants. They are backed too by academics in gender studies, queer theory and allied fields, and by the pharmaceutical and healthcare industries, which have woken up to the fortunes to be made from gender affirmative medicine. This powerful new lobby far outnumbers the trans people it claims to speak for, and it serves their interests very poorly. Its ideological focus means it seeks to silence anyone who does not support gender self-identification. Trans activism, according to Joyce, pushes gender identity ideology to hide who they really are. Indeed, the imperative of trans activism is to keep the public in the dark. This stealthy approach has been central to trans activism for quite some time. Her book serves to piece together the gender identity puzzle, which others have sought to bury. On the contemporary trans phenomenon, Joyce identifies two groups turning up to gender clinics. The first is androphilic males, who are often highly gender non-conforming in childhood and may develop gender dysphoria and a cross-sex identification if their culture is insufficiently accommodating. If culture was more accepting of sissy boys, she contends the phenomenon of trans women would largely disappear. Indeed, the copious evidence of a strong link between early gender nonconformity and adult homosexuality is something trans activists have sought to bury. Why? The answer, Joyce shows us, is in the second group turning up at the gender clinics, a group far more mysterious. In full demystification mode, Joyce unveils the second group, the autogynephilic transsexuals, who form a secret world, a world rare and even more rarely spoken of, a hidden world of erotic fantasies of pushing a baby buggy, joining a knitting circle, being called ma'am, having bubblegum blowing contests with girls, wearing clip-on earrings, taking birth control pills, having a pap smear test, and so on and on. Joyce's full picture reveals a few rich and powerful men pushing gender identity ideology onto androphilic males to please their autogynephilic sexual desires. Forced feminization, someone making a man cross-dress or undergo sex reassignment surgery, is a staple of transgender erotica. Reaching a crescendo in her chapter Behind the Scenes, Joyce casts light on the shady characters behind trans activism. A movement that focuses on the levers of power rather than building grassroots support is one in which a few wealthy people can have considerable sway. They have shaped the global agenda by funding briefing documents, campaign groups, research and legal actions, endowing university chairs and influencing healthcare protocols. One is an American trans woman billionaire, Jennifer James Pritzker. The other two billionaires, neither transgender, also spend lavishly on trans activism. One is John Stryker. The third billionaire funder of trans activism is George Soros. The final character, appears in an earlier chapter and this one. Trans woman Martine Rothblatt, a billionaire biotech entrepreneur who goes as far as arguing that transhumanism, a loose movement that seeks to conquer death, is a natural extension of gender identity ideology. Transactivism then is presented as a sly and sinister major threat to humanity, which has duped vast layers of society with its deafening and silencing gender identity ideology. From gay rights and feminist organisations promoting policies that harm gay people and women, to children's charities tearing up safeguarding measures, to scientific groups repeating cult-like mantras, to academia spreading applied postmodernism, and a form of activism known as social justice that seeks to remake humanity along these ideological lines. Joyce claims that her book stands in the tradition of the Enlightenment. Likewise, gender-critical feminists speak to the importance of reason, science, and material reality. Yet, the whole movement against gender identity ideology reflects a visceral politics of disgust against an imaginary, powerful, harmful, and perverted, sexualised and racialised other. I'll end with the words of one gender-critical academic in defence of Joyce's book against the allegation of anti-Semitism. The word Jewish is not there. Okay, thank you very much for listening.